Have you ever wondered why, exactly, you feel this almost physical blockage when you think about leaving the house? It's not just a vague sensation or a fear that dissolves over time. It's a wall, an invisible but solid wall that grows bigger every time you give in to it. Most people, and maybe even you, think this is just a psychological problem that needs to be solved so life can return to normal. But what if this narrative has been wrong all along? Jordan Peterson teaches us that often what we perceive as a weakness is not just a flaw to be eliminated, but a sign that something essential in the structure of our lives is disorganized. Fear, in this case, is not just a symptom, it's a messenger. It points with surgical precision to the areas where your personal foundation is shaky, and like any messenger, it will keep knocking on your door, louder and louder, until you decide to listen. Imagine that your home, which today represents refuge, gradually begins to transform into an isolated island. At first, this island seems safe. The people outside can't hurt you. Unforeseen events can't reach you. But slowly, the sea separating your island from the mainland grows deeper, more turbulent, and you realize there's no bridge back. Every day you don't cross the threshold, this bridge deteriorates further. The safe space becomes a prison, and the jailer isn't someone else, it's you. Common logic would say, you need to calm down, wait for the fear to pass, and then act. But this is a fatal mistake. Waiting for fear to disappear before facing life is like waiting for your body to build muscle before starting to train. It's training that builds strength, and action that builds courage. The waiting for the right moment mentality is the perfect recipe for sinking deeper into isolation. Peterson confronts this mindset directly, and at times uncomfortably. He doesn't sugarcoat his message, because he knows that a soft truth doesn't bring about transformation. What he's saying in essence is that the outside world won't reorganize itself to accommodate your insecurity. It's you who needs to reorganize yourself internally to deal with the world. And this reorganization begins right where you are now, not in some ideal future where you'll feel ready. The fear of leaving home is actually a reflection of a series of unfought battles. Small decisions avoided, conversations postponed, responsibilities ignored. These small omissions accumulate until they become a giant at the door. And every time you retreat, that giant grows. Peterson reminds us that life moves forward through confronting the difficult. There is no sure shortcut to confidence. It is carved in the stone of daily resistance. That's why in this first chapter, the challenge isn't to understand fear, but to question the story you've been telling yourself about it. You're not just afraid to leave. You're facing an invitation, or rather, a summons, to rebuild your foundation. Fear is just the siren that announces that the ground beneath your feet needs strengthening. That's the hook, and it's not comfortable. It's meant to make you ask yourself, if I keep giving in to this fear for another month, another year, where will I be? That question is a shock, and that's exactly what we need here. Because only when the discomfort of staying in the same place outweighs the discomfort of moving forward, will you move. And today, perhaps, is the moment when that scale begins to tip. There comes a time in the lives of those who face anxiety and fear of leaving home, when the silence becomes deafening. The walls, once neutral, begin to weigh down. The windows become screens showing a distant world, as if real life were happening elsewhere and you'd been left behind. It's not just loneliness. It's the feeling of slowly disappearing, even though you're physically present. This is where many get lost, because they believe this pain is a sign of weakness, as if feeling it were something shameful. But the truth is, this feeling is proof that you're still alive, still feeling, still aware that something is deeply out of place. And that's a good thing. Pain is, paradoxically, an ally. It's what prevents you from accepting apathy as your final destination. Jordan Peterson describes this state as being in the realm of chaos. It's not a loud chaos, with explosions and screams. It's a silent chaos, like a thick fog that settles in and blocks your vision of the road. This fog is composed of all the doubts, all the what-ifs, and all the images of failure your mind projects. It's a subtle but persistent enemy, and that's precisely why it's so dangerous. Validating pain means recognizing it as legitimate, without diminishing or disguising it. It's looking at the wound and saying, yes, it exists, and yes, it hurts. It's not drowning in suffering. but recognizing that the struggle you face is real and deserves respect. When you understand that your battle is not against something imaginary but against a real adversary, you begin to see it differently. This validation is vital because without it, you risk falling into denial, and denial is the breeding ground for paralysis. Pretending that everything is fine when it clearly isn't is like letting a fire burn beneath the walls, thinking it will burn itself out. It won't. It will consume everything until there's nothing left to rebuild. Peterson encourages us to face chaos with respect. It's not blind fear, but recognition of the enormity of the task. He compares this journey to a mythological battle. You are the warrior, fear is the dragon, and your home, once a safe castle, has become a besieged territory. The dragon won't go away because you close the gates. It will grow until it can no longer be ignored. Validating pain also requires you to stop comparing yourself to people who seem to navigate life effortlessly. You're fighting a different kind of war, and this war has immense value, because every small victory means so much more to you than to someone who's never had to face what you've faced. For you, stepping outside your home is an act of heroism that the world may not understand, but it redefines who you are. Acknowledging pain in this way creates a connection with your own courage, because courage isn't born from comfort, but from confrontation. It's in this honest recognition that you begin to feel a thread of determination emerging. It's the moment you realize, I'm not just a victim of this fear, I'm the protagonist of this fight. This perspective changes everything. It takes you out of the passive, patient position and places you as an active agent in your own story. You're not just waiting for the fear to go away, you're preparing to face it. And it is this preparation, this clear awareness of the battlefield, that will be the foundation for everything that comes next. When you're lost, any movement feels risky. It's like walking through unfamiliar territory at night. Every step could be a mistake, every sound a threat. In this scenario, courage isn't enough. You need a map. And this is where Jordan Peterson comes in, not as a miraculous savior, but as someone who has traversed similar territories and built routes to guide you. Peterson doesn't sugarcoat reality. He doesn't say it's going to be okay as empty consolation. Instead, he begins by acknowledging that things might get worse before they get better. He knows that facing the fear of leaving home or any paralyzing fear isn't a matter of waiting for it to go away, but of taking structured action so that, little by little, it loses its power. And this structure is precisely what most people trapped in this cycle lack. His approach is a combination of philosophy, clinical psychology, and personal experience. He understands that fear is not just a feeling, it's an entire system, sustained by accumulated thoughts, habits, and omissions. And to dismantle this system, willpower isn't enough. Method is required. Peterson proposes something that seems simple but requires discipline: organizing the world around you as a way to organize your mind. He starts with what's closest to you, with what's under your immediate control. Tidying your room, keeping a schedule, taking care of your body. For those overcome by fear, these actions may seem irrelevant, but in reality they act as anchors, small proofs that you are still capable of influencing your environment and therefore influencing your own internal state. What makes Peterson a respected authority is not only his ability to teach these ideas, but the consistency with which he lives and applies them. He is not a distant theorist, but someone who has faced his own battles against disorder and chaos. His life is marked by personal and professional challenges that forced him to develop not only knowledge, but also resilience. By presenting Peterson as a guide, we're not talking about a master carrying you on his shoulders, but a strategist who gives you a plan and demands that you execute it. This demand is a fundamental part of transformation, because, as he emphasizes, no one can fight your war for you. The map he offers isn't linear. He doesn't promise that by following 10 steps, fear will disappear forever. Instead, he teaches principles that adapt to your reality, allowing you to move forward even when the path seems closed. These principles include facing challenges gradually, telling yourself the truth, and taking responsibility for what's within your reach. And this is where the presence of a guide becomes so valuable. When we're alone, we tend to overestimate danger and underestimate our capabilities. A competent guide breaks this distortion, reminding you that danger does exist, but that you're more capable than you think, as long as you're willing to move. Peterson's authority comes not from eliminating difficulty, but from showing that it can be overcome. He doesn't promise an absence of fear, but he offers tools to prevent fear from defining your choices. And by listening to his guidance, you begin to realize that there is a concrete path to regaining confidence, even if it requires more effort than you'd like. So before we continue, make a silent pact with yourself. Absorb what you hear from now on not as an interesting idea, but as a practical order to apply today. Because if you've gotten this far, it's because you already feel that the life you're living isn't the life you should be living. If this content has already given you an insight, please give back by subscribing and liking it. It helps us continue this conversation. An army doesn't enter the battlefield with courage alone. Courage without preparation is practically suicide. That's why, to face the fear of leaving home, you need an arsenal, a set of practical and mental tools that serve as weapons in daily combat. Jordan Peterson builds this arsenal using powerful metaphors and simple yet demanding principles that restructure the way you relate to the world. The first tool is organizing your immediate surroundings. This may seem insignificant to those who imagine the battle against fear as something epic and distant, but the reality is that chaos begins in the immediate vicinity. A disorganized room, irregular schedules, broken commitments, all of these fuel the feeling that life is uncontrollable. By organizing what's within your reach, you send a direct message to your brain. I still have control. This sense of control, however small it may seem, is what allows you to face greater threats. The second tool is gradual confrontation. Peterson doesn't advocate rushing into the biggest challenge of all on the first day. That would only increase the likelihood of failure and reinforce fear. Instead, he proposes breaking the enemy down into smaller parts. If going out into the street is impossible, open the door and breathe in the outside air. If talking to strangers seems unbearable, greet your neighbor without prolonging the interaction. Each small victory is new ammunition in your psychological arsenal. The third tool is clear and truthful language. Lying to yourself about how you feel or your willingness to act creates an internal minefield. When you admit, "I'm scared, but I can still do something small today," you transform fear into information, not a barrier. Honesty is like a map that shows where the traps are and where it's safe to step. The fourth tool is establishing rituals. The human brain finds comfort and stability in predictable patterns. Having fixed times for sleeping, waking, eating, and performing tasks reduces the mental space taken up by trivial decisions and frees up energy to deal with what really matters. These rituals act like trenches. They protect you from the constant advance of chaos. The fifth tool is personal accountability. Don't blame the world, circumstances, or other people for your current state. This doesn't mean denying that external factors exist, but accepting that regardless of them, the responsibility for your actions, or inaction, is yours. This is the moment when you stop being an observer of your own life and become a commander. Finally, there's the tool that unites all the others: strategic vision. A soldier who doesn't understand why he's fighting loses motivation at the first setback. You need to know what the ultimate goal is. In your case, it's not simply getting out of the house, but building a life where the freedom to move, act, and choose isn't threatened by fear. These tools are not optional. Each one plays a specific role in the rebuilding process. Neglecting any one of them is like going into combat without essential weapons. Conquering fear is not a one-off moment, but the daily accumulation of disciplined use of these weapons. And as with any military training, you'll make mistakes at first. You'll lose minor battles. But if you maintain consistent use of these tools, you'll notice the enemy begin to retreat, not because they've disappeared, but because you've become much more difficult to defeat. The war against fear isn't won with a single blow, but with the persistence of those who don't let go of their shield, even when they're tired. And every day you apply these tools, you get closer to crossing the boundaries that currently seem insurmountable. There's an almost imperceptible moment when your relationship with your own fear changes forever. Until now, your dominant impulse has been to try to reduce it, circumvent it, postpone confronting it in the hope that time or circumstances would dissolve it. But this moment never arrives on its own. What invariably happens is the opposite. Fear expands, infiltrates more areas of your life, and begins to dictate the rules. The turning point comes when you understand that the strategy of waiting for relief has not only failed, but has also further imprisoned you. Jordan Peterson is clear on this. Fear isn't defeated by seeking comfort, it's transformed by the weight of responsibility. This concept may sound harsh because it implies accepting that the solution requires more of you than you're willing to give right now. But that's precisely where the power of this shift lies. By changing the question, "How do I feel better?" to "What's the next step I should take?" regardless of my emotional state, you begin to escape the maze. This transition is like trading a drifting boat for a battleship. On a boat, you drift with the currents, reacting to tides and storms. On a ship, you have direction, command, and purpose. This doesn't mean the sea becomes calm, but rather that you stop acting like a passenger and assume the role of captain. The first act of responsibility on this journey is to define a minimum territory where you will exercise complete control. For some, this might be their own bedroom. For others, the entire house. The goal is to take absolute control over this space, making it a solid base of operations. This measure doesn't solve everything immediately, but it creates a core of stability that will gradually expand to wider areas, even to the outside world. Responsibility also involves facing discomfort in a planned way. This means not waiting until you feel ready, but committing to specific actions, even when anxiety screams for retreat. It could start with leaving the house for 5 minutes, walking to the corner and back. It could be scheduling a quick meeting with someone you trust. The responsibility here isn't in the scale of the action, but in sticking to the commitment. Another fundamental element is understanding that responsibility isn't just an obligation to yourself, but also to those who depend directly or indirectly on your presence and functionality. Even if you feel isolated, your lack of movement and growth affects those around you. Family, friends, colleagues. Taking responsibility for improvement isn't a selfish act, but an act of service. At the turning point, the internal narrative shifts. Before, fear was an oppressive and uncontrollable force. Now it's seen as a worthy adversary, testing your discipline and revealing your weaknesses so they can be corrected. Fear ceases to be an executioner and becomes a harsh coach, whose role is to mold you into someone more capable. This shift in perspective doesn't eliminate discomfort. In fact, it may temporarily increase it, but it transforms the meaning of that discomfort. It stops being a sign of failure and becomes proof that you're exactly where you should be, on the front lines, doing what needs to be done. The turning point, therefore, is not a dramatic event, but a collection of small decisions made every day that build a new identity. You stop being someone who runs away and become someone who confronts, not because you like it or want to, but because you know it's the only viable path to regaining freedom. And once this transition happens, there is no real return. What exists is the awareness that, however challenging, life outside the cocoon is infinitely more meaningful than the illusory security within it. An anxious mind is like an open browser with dozens of tabs running simultaneously, all issuing alerts at once. The excess of internal and external stimuli creates a constant feeling of overwhelm. In this state, any challenge seems greater than it actually is. That's why, to move forward, you need mental triggers that act like switches, simple, clear elements that cut through the confusion and direct your focus to the right action. Jordan Peterson understands that a disordered mind cannot rely on willpower alone. It needs external structures to act as guides. These triggers are not superficial tricks, they are cognitive anchors that, when activated, reorient your perception and decisions. The first trigger is the clarity of rules. The anxious mind hates the unpredictable, but paradoxically, it thrives on chaotic thoughts. When you establish simple, objective rules such as wake up at the same time every day, or don't end the day without completing at least one planned task, you reduce the room for indecision. These rules act like rails. Even if the train is unstable, it stays in the right direction. The second trigger is the micro-compromiso. Instead of saying, "I'm going to leave the house every day starting tomorrow," which sounds threatening to an alert mind, you make tiny commitments like, "I'll open the door and breathe outside air for 5 minutes." This approach bypasses initial resistance and allows action to begin before fear builds arguments to prevent it. The third trigger is the principle of least truth. Lying to yourself is a silent poison, because it creates a distortion between reality and your internal narrative. Telling the truth, even if partial, is an act of mental alignment. Instead of saying, "I'm fine," you say, "I'm anxious, but I'll try to take a step." This honesty prevents you from hiding behind comfortable illusions, which only prolong the problem. The fourth trigger is the structured anticipation. Anxiety loves the element of surprise because it keeps the mind constantly alert. By planning actions and schedules in advance, you reduce the impact of the unexpected. Having a daily schedule, even a simple one, gives the brain the feeling of a plan, and plans reduce chaos. The fifth trigger is the symbolic reinforcement, creating small celebration rituals when completing tasks, even the smallest ones, serves as a signal to the brain to register progress. It's not about extravagant rewards, but about consciously acknowledging each victory. This recognition activates motivational circuits, making you more likely to repeat the behavior. The sixth trigger is the positive social mirroring, consciously choosing examples of people who have faced similar challenges, and observing how they act and think creates internal models for imitation. The mind learns through observation. Therefore, surrounding yourself with the right references is like setting the compass to the correct north. These triggers act as a psychological safety net. When one fails, another kicks in. They don't eliminate fear, but they create alternative pathways to action when the primary route seems blocked. And like any tool, they require constant use to remain effective. It's not enough to simply understand the concept. You need to practice it until it becomes automatic. First, you'll need to consciously remember to activate these triggers. Over time, they become part of your mindset, operating in the background. When applied consistently, these triggers reorganize the way you interact with the world. They transform anxiety from a diffuse, paralyzing state into a set of signals that can be interpreted and responded to rationally. And this transformation isn't just mental. It translates into concrete actions, such as leaving the house with less stress, keeping commitments, and gradually expanding your comfort zone. Support this mission. Subscribe and like so this message reaches more people. The human mind is shaped by repetition. What you hear and repeat frequently not only takes up space in your memory, but also begins to form the foundation of your beliefs. That's why choosing the words you allow yourself to think and speak is crucial to transformation. Jordan Peterson understands this deeply and uses short yet meaningful sentences as mental anchors that withstand emotional storms. These phrases aren't mantras in the superficial sense of motivational slogans. They're statements that encapsulate life principles, easy to remember and hard to ignore. The goal is simple. When anxiety or fear threatens to take over, repeating these phrases creates a space between impulse and action, allowing you to choose the response instead of being swept away by the reaction. One of the most well-known phrases is, "Face the chaos." It works like a direct command. There's no softness, no promise of comfort, just a clear command to look at what's frightening and take a step toward it. Repeating this phrase doesn't eliminate the discomfort, but it prevents you from hiding from it out of habit. Another central expression is, "Carry your burden." Peterson uses this idea to remind us that life isn't designed to be weightless. The goal isn't to rid yourself of all effort, but to find a weight worth carrying. By repeating this phrase, you begin to reinterpret difficulties not as punishments, but as opportunities to grow stronger. The third is, organize your world. This phrase links practical action to internal transformation. By tidying up what's within your reach, you send a silent message to your brain: I have power over my immediate reality. This physical act of organization mentally reinforces the feeling of control, something crucial when anxiety tries to convince you that everything is unstable. These repetitions don't happen mechanically, but strategically. They should appear at critical moments, before leaving the house, when feeling the onset of an anxiety attack, upon waking, or when starting an important task. It's at these vulnerable points that the mind is most likely to fall back on old patterns. Having key phrases ready creates a mental shortcut to new patterns. Another important aspect is that the repetition of these phrases should be accompanied by mental images. When you say, "Face the chaos," you visualize yourself opening the door and walking outside. When you say carry your burden, you imagine yourself holding something heavy with a firm posture. When you say organize your world, you visualize the environment clean and orderly. This association between words and images strengthens the psychological impact. Over time, these phrases cease to be external instructions from an author or teacher and become part of your own inner voice. This is where the work begins to take hold. You stop relying on external reminders and begin to spontaneously remember how to act. Of course, at first, repetition may seem artificial. It's natural for your mind to wonder, how can a simple phrase change something so complex? But the power lies in simplicity. The shorter and clearer the phrase, the easier it is to access when fear tries to take over. Creating this inner language not only strengthens your immediate response to fear, but also builds a new identity. You begin to see yourself as someone who confronts, who carries, who organizes. These words cease to be mere concepts and become definitions of who you are. And when your identity changes, your actions inevitably change along with it. With each repetition, you reinforce not only what you want to do, but the kind of person you want to become. Imagine a normal day, but unlike any other you're experiencing now. The alarm clock rings, and instead of feeling that immediate weight on your chest, you wake up with clarity about what needs to be done. Not because the world has become less chaotic, but because you've become more prepared to deal with it. The first image that comes to mind is you walking through the front door, not anxiously, but with determination. This vision of the future is neither a fairy tale nor an optimistic fantasy. It is a possible destiny, built piece by piece, by the discipline you apply today. Jordan Peterson teaches that the goal is not to achieve a life without problems, but rather to develop the competence to face them. And this competence is what creates true confidence. In this scenario, you don't avoid the streets, appointments, or interactions. On the contrary, you seek them out, knowing that each encounter with the unknown is another opportunity to train your resilience. The city ceases to be a minefield and becomes a territory to explore. The unfamiliar faces that once generated tension are now just part of the landscape, and the world no longer seems threatening. The vision of a desirable future isn't just about external actions, but about the internal transformation they represent. You see yourself as someone who takes responsibility, who doesn't shy away from discomfort, who delivers on what you promise yourself. This self-image is powerful because it shapes not only what you do, but also what you believe you deserve. In this future, fear hasn't completely disappeared. It never completely disappears, but it has lost its power to dictate the course of your life. It has become a sign that you're moving in the right direction, that you're touching on areas where there's still room for growth. Instead of paralyzing you, it serves as a reminder that you're alive, active, and committed to something greater than your own immediate safety. You begin to notice subtle changes in the way people treat you. There's more respect, more openness, more invitations. This doesn't happen by chance. When someone lives with clarity and courage, the world responds differently, and this response further reinforces your resolve, creating a positive cycle of action and recognition. This projection of your ideal self also serves as a guide for present-day decisions. With each dilemma, you ask yourself, what would the strongest version of me do right now? This simple question, repeated consistently, aligns your daily choices with your long-term goal. And little by little, the right choices become automatic because you're training your mind to operate according to the pattern of your desired future. The most important thing about this vision is understanding that it's not given, but earned. No one delivers confidence ready-made, just as no one delivers muscles ready-made. You build it, day after day, facing the discomfort necessary to shape the person you want to be. And this process is, in itself, a source of pride and meaning. As you project yourself into this future, you realize that you're not just seeking to leave home. You're seeking to become a hero in the deepest sense, someone capable of protecting, leading, and positively influencing your own destiny and that of those around you. And when this vision becomes clear enough, staying where you are now ceases to be an acceptable option. So far, you've been on a journey of reflection, understanding, and building new tools. But all this knowledge only turns into real change when it's translated into action. The transition from thought to action is where theory becomes practice. And that's precisely why a call to action is so powerful. It's not a formality or a symbolic gesture. It's a summons for you to cross the line and take a stand before the world. Jordan Peterson emphasizes the importance of taking visible action. This is because public commitment creates a kind of healthy pressure. When you declare your intentions to others, it increases your sense of accountability and reduces the likelihood of backtracking. That's why, at this point, it's not enough to simply think, "I'm going to try to change." You need to say it, write it down, and document it. Make this decision something others can see and follow. The first step is to clearly and firmly declare to yourself what your next concrete action will be. Not a vague goal like improve my life, but something specific and measurable. It could be, I will leave the house for 10 minutes every day this week, or I will start a conversation with someone I see regularly. This specificity transforms the idea into a task, and tasks can be accomplished. The second step is to share this decision. This can happen in the comments of a piece of content, in a conversation with a friend, or in a support group. The format doesn't matter. What matters is that you're expressing yourself in a way that creates a connection between what you say and what you'll do. This connection bridges the gap between intention and execution. The third step is to create a tracking system. When Peterson talks about accountability, he's not just referring to the act of taking on a burden, but also the discipline of carrying it every day. Establish a way to track your progress, whether by writing down your actions daily or reporting to someone you trust. This creates a check-in cycle that maintains consistency, even when motivation fluctuates. Another fundamental function of the call to action is to connect you with a network of people who are in the same battle. Sharing your commitment opens the door for others to join in and for you to find allies. Fear and anxiety thrive in isolation, but weaken when exposed to human contact and mutual support. By connecting with others who have also decided to take action, you build a collective shield against the temptation to give up. This is where action stops being just about you. When you commit publicly, you also inspire. Your courage, even if small in your eyes, can be the trigger for someone else to begin their own journey. This is how the impact multiplies. Each act of exposure and responsibility creates ripples that propagate beyond your immediate sphere. Therefore, this is the time to formalize your pact. Don't just absorb ideas, but take visible and intentional action. Write down your first practical step now and share it. Mark this day as the official beginning of a new phase, not just in your mind, but in the real world. If you're ready to take the first step, let us know in the comments and sign up now. This simple gesture isn't a favor to the content creator. It's a commitment to yourself. Every subscription, every comment, every share is a way of affirming, I'm here, willing to face whatever it takes to change my life. From this moment on, your decision ceases to be an isolated idea in your mind and becomes a public milestone. And public milestones have a special power. They remind us, even on difficult days, that we've already crossed a line from which we have no intention of retreating. We've reached a point where all ideas, tools, and commitments need to be unified into a clear vision. So far, we've walked the path of understanding fear, acknowledging pain, building discipline, and defining responsibilities. Now, the goal is to consolidate all of this into a definitive message. You are capable of facing your suffering, and the path to this lies in daily responsibility. Jordan Peterson calls this identity shift, accepting the burden willingly. This expression isn't just rhetoric. It conveys a core principle. Taking responsibility for yourself and your future means recognizing that chaos never disappears, but that it can be brought to order. This requires abandoning the idea that life will become easy, or that the absence of fear is the final destination. The true goal is to become so capable that no challenge is great enough to make you back down. The hero's manifesto begins with an act of decision. You no longer wait for the ideal moment or the perfect motivation. The act of deciding, here and now, to face what scares you is the foundation of this new identity. This decision isn't made quietly, so as not to upset anyone. It's made with the firmness of someone who knows they're changing the course of their own story. Persuasion, at this point, isn't about convincing you to take the first step, but about making you unable to accept inertia. It's reminding you that every day that passes without action is a day given in to fear. It's showing you that however uncomfortable it may be to face, the discomfort of not acting is always greater in the long run. The manifesto also reinforces the connection between action and meaning. Life isn't just about enduring days until something better happens. Life is about building something worthwhile, and that requires deliberate effort. When you take responsibility and fulfill it, even the simplest tasks, you're telling the world, and yourself, that your presence matters. Another key point is the refusal to see yourself as a permanent victim. Acknowledging difficulties is necessary, but transforming them into justification for never taking action is a betrayal of yourself. The hero is not the one who lives without wounds. It's the one who, despite them, keeps moving forward. And that's the image you need to carry. That of someone who navigates chaos with their head held high, not because they're invincible, but because they've decided not to be defeated. To solidify this identity, it's crucial to keep repeating the principles you've learned alive. Key phrases, mental triggers, and future visions all need to be constantly revisited. The mind is fickle, and without continuous reinforcement, old narratives can resurface. The overall persuasion strategy is to create a constant presence of these ideas until they become a natural part of your thinking and acting. Finally, persuasion is completed with the awareness that this journey is ongoing. There is no definitive finish line. Each victory paves the way for a greater challenge, and this is not a reason for frustration but for pride. It means you are growing, expanding your capabilities, building a life that once seemed distant. This manifesto is not just a collection of words. It's a call, a reminder that responsibility is the shield and the sword against chaos. That fear is a sign that something important awaits you, and that every step taken in the right direction, no matter how small, is an act of victory. Join us in this battle. Sign up and let's face it together.